Hello, I'm Loughton MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, and welcome to the latest of my video podcast. Now I want to talk about the immigration bill and specifically the amendments which Parliament debated last night on Monday about the proposals to allow a further 3,000 refugee children in Europe to come to the UK, the so-called Dubs Amendment, which had been supported by the House of Lords. Now this is a very difficult subject, and it's a subject about which many people, including me, have passionate and strong views, quite understandably, and nobody can have been left unmoved by the scenes we've seen on a regular basis about the plight of refugees from Syria in particular over recent months and indeed years. So last night we had a debate about whether the UK should take a further 3,000 children, and I supported the government and voted against that particular amendment. Now I did so having taken a very close interest in this whole subject, as one would expect from somebody who was the former Children's Minister, who spent a lot of time dealing with child welfare and safeguarding issues. I went to Jordan a while back. I visited the Zaatari refugee camp, the largest refugee camp in the world at the time, with some 86,000 Syrian refugees. I met many other Syrian families tragically and horrifically affected by the war in Syria in the local communities. I've met other Syrian refugees. I went with the charity The Tear Fund, doing some fantastic work helping Syrian children to maintain an education, often with Syrian teachers who've had to flee from Syria as well. So this is a subject that I've looked at in some detail, and it was a very passionate debate last night, and there were some very good contributions that it's worth listening to. But the thing that worried me is, from listening to many of the people putting forward support for this amendment, one would think that the UK isn't actually doing anything, and almost that the UK is the only country that actually can make a difference here. Well, I think it's worth actually looking at what the United Kingdom government and the UK taxpayer has been doing in this whole arena, and I think it's impressive, and I think we've done the right thing. And it's very controversial in some people's eyes about the amount of taxpayers' money that goes on international development projects, but I think it's absolutely right in this case. It's just remind us of some of the things that we've actually done in recent weeks and months. First of all, we've now spent, or will be spending this year, £2.3 billion on displaced Syrian refugees. That's mostly going on supporting those people in Syria, close to Syria, in the camps, giving medical aid, educational aid, welfare aid, all sorts of practical aid to try and give them some degree of comfort and safety in obviously quite difficult circumstances. Now, the many refugees I've spoken to, all they want to do is to go back to Syria when it's safe to do so, and being able to maintain them in safer countries close to Syria, and in some cases within Syria itself, in Arabic-speaking countries where they can be looked after properly, not just in refugee camps, but actually going to rented accommodation at local schools and things as well, then that's the best possible thing to do. And that's the line that the UK government has taken as to why virtually all our spend has been concentrated there. £2.3 billion. That's actually more money than the whole of the rest of the EU put together. This is no mean investment. It's something I think the UK can be very proud of. But let's look at the other things that we've done. We hosted the London conference back in February. Many other countries around the world came forward to offer help and financial assistance, a pledge to create some 1.1 million jobs at least in the area around Syria, so there can be work and employment and sustainability for those families not able to go back to their homes in Syria, and importantly 1.7 million quality education places as well. There's a pledge to try and make sure that every Syrian child at school age is able to maintain an education. That is really important, and our taxpayers' money, our programmes, our support for aid organisations is absolutely integral to that. Other things that we've done: we are in the UK the largest bilateral contributor to humanitarian response for the crisis in Europe and the Balkans. We've spent £46 million for refugees in Europe on life-saving aid, on food, infant packs, on hygiene kits, on bedding and welfare. We've spent £10 million on a refugee children fund alone. We are seconding resources to European Asylum Support Office operations in Italy and Greece, who obviously have been at the forefront of refugees coming across the Mediterranean and the Aegean to those countries. And the point of that is to speed up identifying those children who particularly will qualify for asylum status, and particularly those who can be reunited with their families, some of whom will be in the United Kingdom and other European countries already. We've seconded some senior asylum experts to the French Interior Ministry, the equivalent of Home Office, to improve family reunion, and we've so far taken 24 Syrian children to reunite them with their families who are already safely in the United Kingdom. We've dealt with over 3,000 other asylum applications from unaccompanied children from other parts of the world in the last year alone. And last week we announced an agreement with the UNHCR, the part of the United Nations, on a new resettlement scheme to take 3,000 children at risk from the Middle East area and from North Africa. This was on the recommendation of UNHCR itself, that we will be extending the scheme to all children at risk. This is the largest resettlement effort to focus on children at risk from the Middle East and North African area. So all this talk yesterday about Britain should take 3,000 child refugees from Europe, we've actually already said we're going to take 3,000 child refugees from unsafe areas. And what's happening here is the government has made a value judgment, and I think it's the right value judgment. We could take 3,000 child refugees from European countries, safe countries, or we could take 3,000 most vulnerable children from unsafe countries in North Africa, in the Middle East, in and around Syria itself. I think those are most in need, most vulnerable, and hopefully we can give them help before some of them get trapped by people traffickers and begin very dangerous journeys across the water in overcrowded boats, and we know too many have tragically lost their lives. We've also just offered at least 75 expert personnel to help with processing the administration of migrants in Greek reception centres. We're giving interpreters, medical support and supplies there. Again, really important, because we see those crowds of people coming in. We need to make sure they're properly looked after, and we're giving some practical support from some real experts who can help there on the ground. And of course, we've now got 3 border force vessels operating in the Mediterranean. First of all, to pick up people who are at risk in the sea and hopefully save lives, but also to tackle people traffickers. Remember, many of these families and many of these kids are where they are in Europe because people traffickers are taking advantage of them for financial gain, and in some cases sexual exploitation as well. These are just a few of the things that the United Kingdom has been doing with your taxpayers' money, and I think these are really practical, fulfilling, worthwhile measures that we should be proud of. So I find it just slightly galling when a lot of people are critical of the government, as if we haven't done anything, as if we're not stepping up to the mark and Britain isn't doing its fair share or pulling its weight. I would say that actually we are pulling our weight and doing far, far more than our fair share. We can always do more, of course we can, but there are other people who should be doing more as well as us, and I hope that we're setting a really good example. So it's not a question of whether we're taking refugees or not. We are taking refugees. We're taking more refugees. We're specifically taking another 3,000 child refugees. It's a question of where we're taking those refugees from, and I think the government have got it right to take them from those places where they are most in danger, where the source of the problem is, and that's where the vast majority of the UK aid programme has been going. So I think we've done the right thing. And there's also a case which says, well, if you just keep taking more refugees, whether they're children or adults, from Europe, then there'll be another 3,000 and another 3,000 trafficked by people traffickers in many cases, and you're not actually helping the problem at source. And there's one final point. We've seen on our television screens lots of coverage of the jungle at Calais and other impromptu refugee camps just across the channel, and people have been saying this is a disgrace. It is, it's a humanitarian disgrace, but why have the French authorities and others not dealt with it better? If we had a camp of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 refugee or asylum seekers at Dover on the south coast, including many children, those children would have been taken into care. Our social services would have done the right thing, found them homes, given them a place of safety, whilst their long-term future can be properly assessed and proper provision made. Why didn't that happen in France? Why isn't that happening in other parts of the continent? I remember also in the United Kingdom, I knew this and dealt with this when I was Children's Minister. We have a large number of children in care in this country already. We actually have a shortage of something like 10,000 foster care placements that we need to look after. I think we need to be doing more on those asylum seekers already in this country who've got a longer term future as well. So we need to think of everybody. So that's the reason I voted with the government last night to resist these calls, perfectly well-intentioned calls, and I can understand why people want to support them, to take a further 3,000 refugee children. But we've pledged to take a further 3,000 refugee children. I think that's doable. I think we're taking the most vulnerable children from the least safe areas, and I think that is the right thing to do. In future, I'm sure we can do more. I'm sure we will do more, but actually we are doing much more than many other countries. So I just hope that sometimes people, and I can understand why they feel passionate about this, look at the facts. Let's give credit where credit is due. And if we do need to be critical of someone, then let's look to some of the other countries around Europe who should be doing a better job of stepping up to the plate and looking after many of these refugee children who find themselves in desperate circumstances through no fault of their own. I hope you understand now why I voted the way I've done. I did do last night, and I put a letter on my website as well from the Immigration Minister, which sets out exactly the government's position. If you've got any further queries on that, still want to take issue with me, then you know how to get hold of me. But I've set out my reasons for doing what I did. I hope you now appreciate why I did them with the very best of intentions to make sure we have a sustainable, long-term plan to help those desperate refugees who really need our help and deal with the problem at its source. Thank you for listening.